Thank you for joining us today. Today's interactive session with Dr. Anindya Ghose on using artificial intelligence and blockchain to monetize the mobile economy. And we have with us Sri Devashish, IAS, Additional Chief Secretary, Information Technology and Electronics, Government of West Bengal. We'll now request Mr. Debe Mukherjee, President Designate of the Chamber, to please deliver the formal welcome address.
Thank you, Angana. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this afternoon session, interactive session with Dr. Anindya Ghose. I was under the impression that Angana would be introducing Dr. Ghose because when she sent the note to me, it was such a stunning introduction. I thought I will let that, the glory shine on Angana to introduce Dr. Ghose. But welcome to you, Dr. Ghose, on behalf of the Chamber. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Shri Devashish Sen, our Additional Chief Secretary, Information Technology and Electronics, Government of West Bengal. And also the, I don't know how to describe that, the person who has made this part of the town what it is today. You know, there's a concept of city manager in the Western world. I think you most aptly, the most apt description of yours would be the city manager who has built this city and is maintaining it quite well. Thank you very much, sir, for your gracious presence this afternoon. And I'm sure all of you will join me in extending a hearty welcome to Dr. Ghose. As I mentioned, when Angana sent me the note on the subject of the interaction this afternoon, I reflected a bit and I realized how deep a symbiotic relationship exists between a mobile device and the user of the device. You know, we take it for granted, but then I thought to myself that yes, it can do wonders. And if a mobile device is placed or positioned within the context of a mobile ecosystem, I think it works magic. Well, as a starting point, you know, apart from giving locational data or timestamp data, the contextual information and data that surrounds the user interacting with the device, I think sets off trigger points that not only enhances the user experience, but also generates considerable, countless opportunities for businesses, both in terms of products and services. I mean, it's an amazing transformational journey that we see today with the mobile device. And what is even more interesting is, when you use these IT tools like AI and machine learning and blockchain, and I think Dr. Ghose is going to speak on all that, that again opens up the opportunities in terms of not only innovative solutions in terms of the services all the service providers could provide, but other services too, for product companies, for service companies, and above all, for the user, for his experience, his or her experience. So I think we will be on this transformational journey, see how IT tools interact, how they interplay with the mobile device, and I'm sure this will be a magical experience for all of us this afternoon. I'm sure there will be an interactive session, I'm told, which Mr. Arnob Basu, and I need to compliment Arnob because what a grand beginning for the IT committee of the Chamber. And I think it's absolutely a wonderful initiative. He is playing a stellar role in terms of actually delivering some world-class programs from the IT committee of the Chamber. And I don't see Chirunji Bhattacharya, possibly, is he coming, Angana? he's supposed to come and Mr. Sen as well, probably assisted by their two co-chair. They are delivering some great work. Without further ado, I would now request Ongona to take the proceedings forward. And again, a very, very warm welcome to all of you, and enjoy this interactive session with Dr. Anindya Ghose. Thank you.
I'll now request Sri Debashish to please kindly address us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mukherjee, Mr. Arnab Babu, and everybody, and especially Dr. Ghose, whom we have all come and assembled to hear. I don't have a speech to deliver. I'll just mention one or two pertinent points that are coming to me from the government point of view. We are very proud, of course, these days, every person in Bengal and India, about the Nobel laureate Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee and his team. And in his latest book, Hard Economics, he is talking of one thing, and in his Poor Economics, that he is talking that how perceptions are changing even in the rural areas, even in the poorest section that is there. And he is mentioning in one place that for the very poor also, when given a certain amount of money, I believe it's somewhere in Africa, and it is seen that they are buying it for a television set, not food. So when they are asked that why don't you buy food, you can feed your hunger, you're instead buying a television. He said, first I must have the television, and then if I have anything, I will have my food. It's so important, entertainment and recreation. And that is what, in the next billion users, digital as Ms. Payal Arora, she argues that getting onto the streaming entertainment and video media, and the way mobile is penetrating in rural India, and the way prices of data is the lowest in the whole world in India, what is happening is this personal viewing screen and other things, it is deeply penetrating into the villages. And therefore, there is an economic opportunity for people like me in the Department of IT and E. And therefore, we are looking at ways in which, due to the low data cost, due to the penetration of mobiles, what new avenues are coming in. One of the things is very obvious, but it's not very obvious to start with. A brilliant startup which is doing work with us in the NASCOM 10,000 work incubation center he is creating, if you have mobiles, you have to repair them. And if you know the know-how, you can repair from the iPhone to the latest Samsung, Google Play. But it requires a lot of skills and inventory. So they have done an economic model that deals with training people, attending to calls, somewhat like the urban club, and they provide the inventory, and the person who is doing the visit has a very decent income which can go up to 20,000 to 40,000 even in the remote villages. The other thing that we are having, we routinely organize Bengalathon, which is a hackathon, which provides some real life problems that we are sort of trying to solve in the city life, as Mr. Mukherjee said. So one of my favorite themes which I have put last year is Toto on call. Toto, Dr. Ghose may not know, is a colloquial term for an e-rickshaw, mostly illegal, imported from China, but battery operated, pollution free. We like it, the transport department doesn't. But why not have a shared economy with them? Mobiles everybody has, but they are not in the Ola Uber kind of a sharing thing. Why? Not many people know about it. Simple reason, they have mobile, but it's not a smart mobile. And if it's not a smart mobile, your apps don't work. So an Ola Uber kind of a sharing app does not work. And therefore, in the hackathon, we are given a problem. Can you solve it? Can you solve with an e-messages, SMS, or what, I don't know what, but your app will not work, and yet they want to be in the shared economy. Toto on call. So only very recently, I have got a very splendid solution in a very relative. I used to also talk about, I can order with Swiggy and others for very fine restaurant things. But why not the street side fuchka, that is the pani puris? Again the problem. He has a phone, 500 rupee phone, but it is not smart. And only yesterday I had a very detailed interaction with a brilliant startup of Sector 5, and they have come up with, it's there in the Google Play Store already, within 500 meters from my neighborhood, how can I order food even from the street? And what's happening is, whenever somebody is ordering a food with all the menu and everything that Swiggy and Zomato offers, instead of he getting the call directly, it's going through an intermediary and an SMS is sent. But what is happening, he's not looking at his SMS, so a ping tone is sent to him and he sees it and he delivers it himself. And that is the model, that he can't have a delivery system. Pani Puri wala does not have the wherewithal, but whenever he has a time and a spare slack time, he is able to deliver his food. It's still finding its feet. We asked him, what if it's a one enterprise system, how can he leave his shop or the puchka wala? These things are being handled, but we are very impressed, and we very much want to reach out to the lowest section of the strata, and these possibilities are just coming in. Certainly, we would like to hear much more from Dr. Ghose. Thank you very much.
We will now request Dr. Anindya Ghose to please join us. Dr. Ghose is Heinz Riehl Chair Professor of Technology and Marketing at New York University's Leonard and Stern School of Business, where he holds joint appointment in the TOPS and marketing departments. His claim to fame is also he's the author of a book, TAP, Unlocking the Mobile Economy, published by MIT Press, which is the double winner of 2018 Axiom Business Awards, and it has been translated in 5 languages. He is the director of Masters of Business Analytics program in NYU Stern, and that is how I remember we connected with him from the chamber, I think back in 2014. It is with great pride we would like to share with you that he is a Leonard Stern faculty scholar with an MBA scholarship in his name, Ghose Scholarship. And he was named by Poets and Quants as one of the top 40 professors under 40 worldwide, and Analytics Week as one of top 200 thought leaders in big data and analytics. In 2017, he was recognized by Thinkers 50 as one of the top 30 management thinkers globally, and Thinkers 50 also bestowed the Distinguished Achievement Award nomination on digital thinking in 2017. He has worked with multiple well-known MNCs, to name a few: Alibaba, Apple, Berkeley Corporation, Facebook, Samsung, Snapchat. His work is on realizing a business value from IT investments, internet marketing, business analytics, social media, mobile marketing, and related area. And he is also an avid high-altitude mountaineer. He has climbed in many continents and looking forward towards the next summit, and we look forward towards having him on the podium.
Thank you, Angana. But let me start by saying it's a huge pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank Angana and Mr. Mukherjee for hosting this for us. I also want to thank Mr. Sen for being here and Arno for being my partner in crime, so to speak. So, you know, as Anjana mentioned, I've given talks in many parts of the world for the last 20 years, but you know, coincidence or funny enough, this is my first talk in a city that has given me a lot. So it's a huge pleasure for me back to be in Calcutta. I grew up here. I went to middle school and high school here in South Point. I also did my further education here. I'm also especially pleased because my parents are here today, and this is a great honor for me to speak in front of them. So without further ado, let's get started. The topic I had in mind this afternoon was to help put together some of the work that I've done over the past 2 decades. The work includes some recent work in blockchain, a lot of the work that I've done in the mobile economy, and some work using artificial intelligence. And most of the times when I talk about these three things, they seem to be fairly eclectic topics. But turns out there's actually a very nice synergy between all three of them, and this is the content that I'll talk about this afternoon. Okay, so here's where I'll get started. In the past, let's say 10 to 15 years since the digital economy really became ubiquitous and all prevalent, the winners, the companies that have won the battle, so to speak, in the corporate world are the ones who've done a really good job in predicting the known needs of your known customers, right? So for example, if Amazon or if Walmart is essentially buying something, our customers on Amazon or Walmart are buying something, then essentially what they know is a lot more about the preferences, so they will send the same set of customers offers that would resonate with them. Okay? Now it turns out that the future, the way I look at the future, those companies who win this battle are the ones who will actually do a better job in predicting the unknown needs of their unknown customers. Okay? And it's in that, trying to figure out what the unknown needs are, or who your unknown customers are. That's where artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to be really pivotal. Okay? So a very simple example might drive home the point. One of the world's largest global retailers saw that on Friday evenings, the sales of beer and the sales of diapers simultaneously go up. Okay? So the sales of beer and the sales of diaper. Now, prima facie, there's no connection between the two, right? So their data science team goes to the C-suite leadership team and say this is happening, and half of the team said, oh, this is probably just noise. Well, the other half said, you know what, maybe it's actually worth investigating. What's really going on? Why would the sales of beer and the sales of diapers go up? The story unfolds that the team goes to look at the data, and they find out that on Friday evenings, a lot of the young dads coming back home from work get a call from their spouse or their partner and said, hey, remember we have a toddler at home, a 2-year-old, so pick up a pair of diapers. And by the way, the dad is looking at, it's Friday, right, so the weekend coming up, so on the way back, they'll also pick up some beer, right? You want to stock up your inventory because you run out of beer. So the young father or the young mother picking up diapers is also picking up beer simultaneously. That's the reason that these things are going up. So this retailer then essentially redesigned the aisles and the stores in the retail system so the diapers get placed right next to beer. And this is an example of very clear data-driven prediction that somebody else might have thrown off as noise, but this is where this particular company leveraged and did it really well. Okay, so that's an example of what we call trying to leverage unknown needs of unknown customers simply by using data. So the framework that we worked over the last 2 decades was something like this. So your mobile phone is the single largest source of data about your customers, right? Because like Mr. Mukherjee very nicely said, right, there's a very deep symbiotic relationship between users and phones. We are constantly embedded in our phones, right? We are doing a lot of things on our phones. The phone is generating tremendous amount of data about individual consumer preferences. So it becomes a very invaluable source of data. My background, my training is in AI. So during my PhD days, we got trained in machine learning and econometrics and deep learning and so on. So what I do is I take data from companies, I use the training that I have in AI, and then increasingly, right, one of the things that we have to worry about in this economy is the veracity of the data. There's a lot of fake news, there's fake content, there's fake ads, right? There's a lot of fraud going on. And so what we are beginning to see is the use of blockchain is helping us tease out what we call fake data from genuine data. Okay? So the last few minutes I'll get to that in a second. So that's the framework, right? So mobile becomes the source of data, AI is the toolkit, and blockchain helps tease out the veracity, the fraudulent data from genuine data. Okay? So what I have in mind for us this afternoon is, I'll give you a few examples of the work that I've done over the last 2 decades, drawing from different countries. So I've had the good fortune of working in different parts of the world and across different industries and different companies. One of the themes that I have in mind for us is, what are the best practices in using data-driven analytics using that framework of mobile, AI, and blockchain. Okay? We probably won't get time to get into some of the deeper methods, but just to give you a sense, the methods will come from statistics, econometrics, machine learning, experiments, And these are areas that we work with most often. Okay, so the mobile phone, the mobile economy is massive, and I was just talking with some of you during the break that this is an emerging economy. Right now in 2019, the smartphone has essentially influenced about 4.2% of the world's GDP. Okay, and that 4.2% is worth about $3 trillion. What that means is it's only going to grow bigger from here, right? So if you are any organization, private sector, public sector, you need to be on the mobile economy. You need to have a foot in the door, so to speak, and ideally a stronger presence. A couple of years back, I wrote a book that I'm going to mention during the intro. The book essentially highlights all of the work that I'm going to talk about, but it identifies 9 forces that companies and organizations can leverage to better harness the data that's coming out of the mobile economy. Okay? And again, Mr. Mukherjee alluded to the location being a very vital source, and location is the fundamental building block that is in terms of data that's coming out of your phones. But turns out there are 8 other forces that can be superimposed on your location data to even further sort of accentuate the insights you can draw from that data set. Okay? And so I'll talk about a few examples, context and omnichannel and time and crowdedness, and see how some of the work that we've done in different parts of the world, what insights we can draw from that, and ideally start to think about doing some of that in India as well. Okay, so let's start with one example from the retail front. I'm sure you've seen headlines of this sort of some kind. I'm sure you've heard of a very big acquisition that happened last year was Amazon, right? One of the world's top 2 largest e-commerce retailers bought out Whole Foods, right? Whole Foods, many of you have traveled in the West, is a very prominent offline store. And you may have heard of Walmart acquiring Jet.com. And the other thing is, if you've traveled to China recently, you might have come across these pretty fascinating offline stores called Hema stores. Okay? So now Alibaba was like Amazon for the longest time. They were pure play e-commerce retailers with little to no offline presence. As it turned out, Alibaba, taking cues from their counterparts in the West, said, what, we should also have an offline presence. So they have now opened up about several dozen. Everything in China is at a big different scale, right? So it's not one store. They've opened up several dozen stores in several cities in China, and they continue to grow there. So I have worked extensively with Alibaba in a lot of the e-commerce and mobile commerce projects. And my recent work, in fact, I just came back from Shanghai yesterday. My recent work is trying to help them integrate the same consumers' offline data with their online data. Okay? So in other words, what Alibaba wants to know is those people who are browsing on their Alibaba's app, right? So the similar equivalent of Flipkart app, you have Alibaba's app, Taobao or Tmall. They want to know those people who are browsing on their app, how many of them are physically present in the Alibaba offline store as well. And what are they doing in the stores? What are they buying? What are they browsing? What are they not buying? And the reason is, the more information you get about a person's preferences by merging online and offline, right, the stronger you become. And as it turns out, this is a really difficult problem, right? So we've been working on this for more than a year now, using techniques from machine learning and deep learning. And we still have a long way to go because there are several hurdles in integrating this data. So the good news is once you're able to accomplish the integration, there's a gold mine of sort of information and insight that can be leveraged. But it's still taking us quite much longer than we thought. But again, like the silver lining in the dark cloud is that we've done this elsewhere, so we should be able to do this. The problem in China is everything happens in a much bigger scale, right? They have 5 times the population of the US, and the average Chinese customer is far more active on the phone than the average US customer. So if I'm looking at petabytes of data for the US customers, we are dealing with gigabytes or petabytes rather for the Chinese customers. So I think that's the main hurdle, but we hope to get there very soon. So let me give you an example of the work that we've done. This is a short 2-minute video. It is shot in Mexico City. I was in Mexico City earlier in January this year, helping some of the local Mexican media and TV companies and telecom companies monetize their data. This video will give you a sense for how companies are thinking about this. So take a look at this.
The traffic jam whopper. We use real-time data to detect our potential buyers in a traffic jam to offer them a whopper and deliver on the move. Our media was 100% dynamic, promoting our service only in high congestion zones. By leveraging traffic and drivers' real-time data, we adjusted our billboards' location and content. The messages displayed information about the remaining time in traffic to order, and personalized updates about deliveries in progress. Also, raised banner ads and push notifications invited drivers to get a whopper as soon as they entered our delivery zones. People were able to use voice commands to place the order and avoid tickets. Finally, using the latest Google Maps APIs, our app pinpointed vehicle location and speed in order to deliver for the first time ever to a driver on the move. The delivery zones changed, following the traffic light, making our service available when a gridlock was identified, always within a 3-kilometer radius from the restaurants. In just 1 week, we increased delivery orders by 63%, and our daily app download rate increased 44 times, becoming the #1 fast food app, surpassing McDonald's, Domino's, and Starbucks in Mexico. Coming soon, Los Angeles, San Paulo, and Shanghai. The traffic jam walk.
Enjoy the traffic jam.
Okay, so I hope you got the message, but let me sort of do a recap, right? What's going on in Mexico City is just like any other big city, there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of traffic jam, right? We are sitting in going from home to work for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And what Burger King, which is a fast food company around the world, figured out is during those 2 hours that you're sitting in the car, right, might be a good time for them to deliver your most favorite fast food snack in the car. Okay? Now, how do they do that? They need to know your precise location data, and they need to also show you ads for the kind of snacks that are available in real time. So what we did in Mexico City is essentially we are leveraging the billboards, right, in any part of the city, right? There's some billboard out there. And using your phone's location data, we know exactly where you are. So at 4:50 p.m., right, we identify that this is a good time to offer you a snack. And you can essentially opt in by looking at the billboard and tapping on the app that, yes, I'm ready for a Burger King, right? Somebody in a scooter will come and deliver that to you. Okay. So this was an example that we have now since replicated in a much more sort of, I guess, deeper, meaningful form. So let me now take you from instead of Mexico City, let's come to Asia, right? So this is the city of Seoul in South Korea. And if you've been to Seoul, you recognize that the Han River divides the city into north and south. Okay? So the north of Han River is called the Gangbuk area, and the south is called Gangnam, from Gangnam Style, if you remember that video. Right? So here's an example of some consumer. This person, John Doe, right? John Doe is an anonymized person. We don't need to know who John Doe is. All we need to know is what he's doing. So John Doe leaves home. That the first dot is his home. The second dotted is work. So he leaves home and he goes to work, and it takes about half an hour or 45 minutes for him to commute every day. And then he comes back home. So this is his typical trajectory from Monday to, let's say, Thursdays. He goes from home to work and comes back home. Now on Fridays or on the weekends, what John Doe does is he leaves home, he goes to office, but instead of coming back home, what he will do is he'll make several other stops. Okay? He'll go to maybe a client call, maybe he's in sales and business development, or maybe he goes with a family shopping mall trip or a movie theater, maybe he goes to a restaurant or some other place, and then he comes back home. This is the kind of trajectory data, right, that exists with 3 different kinds of companies in the world. The first are the platform companies, right? So the Googles and the Facebooks, etc. The second are, any significant app, right, that you have. Let's say the weather.com app, for example, or whatever app that's your favorite. They have an SDK that is essentially location enabled, so that they'll have that information. But the company or the set of companies who have the richest and the most valuable data of this kind turns out to be the telecom providers. Okay? Telecom providers have started to realize around the world, not just Reliance is in cutting edge here, but not just Reliance or Airtel or Vodafone, but across the world, right? So from China Mobile to British Telecom to Verizon, etc., they've all realized that there's not much money they can make by selling their usual products, such as internet data plans or voice calls or text messages. So the real opportunity for them is in monetizing the location data that they have about consumers, because every time you tap on your phone, right, the one company that you know for certain will have that information is a telecom provider. Okay? So given the extreme competition in the regular products, they are now moving away, and they are essentially going up against the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, right? And Reliance in India is doing exactly that. We had sort of predicted this 3 years back, that Reliance Jio combination with Reliance Retail is a very powerful synergistic source of data, and we are starting to see that already. So anyway, the South Korean companies invited me and said, hey, we have this kind of data, can you help us figure out how to monetize this data? So I worked with them for a number of months. There were several different projects. The one that I'm talking about now was about a year or so long. And essentially, you can imagine that once you know the location data of all of your subscribers to this level of precision, right, you can partner with several other collaborators, whether they are brands or marketers, advertisers, and do a lot of contextual targeting. Okay? So we did that, and let me give you an example of what that means. So this is a billboard ad, right? This example is from London's Piccadilly Circus, which is home to a lot of electronic billboards. So if you go to London now, in this particular billboard area, they have video cameras installed in different billboards. And by looking at the license plate of the car that you're driving, they can now figure out which household you belong to and show you targeted ads based on your household data. Okay? So it's not one-to-one yet, but nonetheless, it's household level targeting. So the lights of this particular billboard have only been turned off twice in the history of London. First, when Princess Diana died as a show of respect, and second time when London converted its billboards into digital billboards. Okay? So that sort of took us from Europe, it took us to Asia back, and this is an example from Japan, from Tokyo. Now, if you've been to Tokyo, there's a part of Tokyo called Shibuya Crossing, which is very, very densely populated, very congested, because it's strategically located in the middle, so people going from north to south or east to west, they have to go through Shibuya. Now, Shibuya is also home to some really massive electronic billboards. Okay? Now, electronic billboards are a prime real estate spot for advertising and marketing, right? So what we thought is, can we leverage electronic billboards with mobile phone location data and create some sort of an online and offline synergy? Okay, so how do we do that? So imagine you've got, let's say, Mr. Nakamoto, right? Some anonymous customer who's passing through Shibuya. So NTT Docomo, which is like the Reliance or the Airtel, the main telecom provider of Japan, they know, just like Reliance and Vodafone and Airtel know precisely when a particular person crosses a particular path of the city, if he or she does that regularly. So they know that Mr. Nakamoto and like 10,000 other people will go through Shibuya on Friday at 2 p.m. They always do that. They've done it for 5 years. Okay? So the idea is that some randomized sample of these people who are in Shibuya on Friday at 2 p.m. will basically get to see an ad on the billboard. Right, so we partner with Nike, one of the favorite bigger apparel and sports retailers. And Nike has a new product ad that shows up on the billboard on Friday at 2 p.m. and it runs for 3 minutes. So any person who's in the vicinity of that billboard ad has some probability of seeing the ad, and all of those people will get a targeted offer from Nike at 2 p.m. in the next 3 minutes saying, hey, welcome, Mr. Basu, Mr. Mukherjee, we have a 25% discount for you for any Nike product. Okay? So the idea is that we are showing people a billboard ad, we are sending them a targeted mobile offer, and then we are looking at, are they actually acting upon those offers in the form of buying products. So we found through massive randomized controlled trials, we found a 400% increase in product redemptions when the same set of people see both the billboard ad and the targeted mobile ad. Okay? So having seen some success in Asia, we then were called upon by companies in Europe. So what I'll talk about next is the largest sort of mobile marketing partnership that we were successfully done. This is across 374 cities and towns in Western Europe. We partnered with more than 3,500 different companies, small, medium, large, and so on. And again, the idea here was to send people targeted offers, but there was one important difference. The difference was that everybody's offer would change in real time based on the distance between you and the store that is sending the offer. Okay? So just imagine that there is a big department store, okay, outside. And we all come from different parts of the city, right? So based on your real-time location, if you are closer to the store, you get a different price than somebody who's further away from the store. And the basic idea is that somebody who's further away from the store needs a stronger incentive to come to you. Whereas if you're already very close to the store, you probably need a smaller incentive because the distance between you and the store is very small. So given again that we had to partner with the telecom providers, with payment systems like American Express and several other moment payment systems, we were able to successfully execute over about 2-year period this partnership with more than 3,000 companies. This is in Germany, for example. This is in German, but you can see that the distance information is mentioned at the very top, right? Right here. So that's the distance between the user and the store, and that changes in real time, and that's what the discount changes as well. Okay. So Europe was always going to be a big challenge because we've all heard about GDPR and the privacy regulations, and we had to navigate several different conversations with lawyers, regulators, and eventually we were able to successfully do it. What was really surprising to me that despite the rhetoric that you see in the media about Europe being very conservative with respect to data and privacy, consumers were telling us something very different. They were telling us, look, if organizations can figure out a way to reward us for our data, if they can put money back in my pocket by me sharing more data, well, I'm okay with that. I'm all for it. Okay. And this is the same sort of consumer psychology we saw in the West, obviously, but also in Asia to a large extent. Okay. This is another very quick example of monetizing crowdedness. Imagine subway trains, right? Like any big city in India, there's a lot of people in subway trains. So here's something that we did in China with some of the biggest cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen. When people are inside subway trains, right, you are in a fairly confined environment. There's no distraction outside, below the underground. Turns out that we said, is it better for companies to send offers, advertisements, or messages to people when they are in very crowded context or in fairly isolated context? So imagine it's a very packed subway with lots of people. Is that a good environment, or is the opposite? So the first one is a fairly, I would say not crowded situation at all, right? It's only 1 person per square meter. Then the second subway example is where you've got about 3 people per square meter. So it's starting to get crowded, but it's not insanely crowded yet. The last one, 5 people per square meter, that tends to be pretty crowded. Now, as it turns out, in some cities in Asia, like in Tokyo, they can pack 11 people per square meter, right? But we're not going to get to that. We sort of restricted to a position where this became pretty much 5 to 6 people per square meter is what you get to see in large cities. Delhi, New York City, Sao Paulo, Shanghai, that typically get 5 to 6 people per square meter. Tokyo was just an exception. So we basically experimented over several brands in several months with variation in crowdedness, and it turns out that when things are more crowded, that's a better time for marketers to send you mobile offers as opposed to when it's less crowded. So we are quite perplexed by that phenomenon, like, why does increasing crowdedness lead to more redemptions? But it turns out then we conducted surveys of these same people, and they told us that, look, when you're surrounded by all these strangers in very crowded contexts, right, the first thing we do is we take our phone out and we immerse ourselves into the phone. The phone becomes a great window for an organization to reach out to you at that time, because you're below the ground, you're not distracted by anything else, you're just looking at the phone. And whether it's a pop-up or a text message or an ad or an in-app offer, you're likely to pay more attention during that subway commute as things are more crowded, because it's not social to make eye contact with strangers, right? You don't stare at people for too long. So we then replicated this in many other cities of the world, and it turns out that fundamentally consumer behavior is very similar. So there's nothing unique about Asia. Like, this is the same phenomena we've seen in other parts of the world as well. Okay. So the last one I'll talk about is what's happening with shopping malls or airports. So imagine if you've been to Singapore, Changi Airport is very one of the most forward-looking airports in the world. Same with Incheon's Terminal 2 in Seoul. So here we are working with several shopping malls and airport retail outlets to figure out how to use the Wi-Fi data of the airport and the mall to target people with, again, the right message at the right time at the right place and so on. Okay? So you can see a red dot in front of the Apple Store, right? Now, if Apple is only using location data, just location data, then it's going to get some, what I would say, noise, meaning that it might say, those gentlemen standing in front of the Apple Store, well, they're all interested in Apple. Turns out that's not really true, because some people might be standing in front of Apple simply because their friend said, hey, the Apple Store is a famous landmark in this mall. Wait for me in the Apple Store, and when I come, let's go grab a coffee. So the Apple Store is simply a landmark as opposed to an actual shopping preference or any sort of buying preference, right? So we realized that using just location data is not enough. We have to sort of increase the precision of insights by sort of aggregating other data. So here's an example of what we did. Suppose that before he went to the Apple Store, he first went to the Samsung store. From Samsung, he went to Huawei. From Huawei, he went to Xiaomi. From Xiaomi, he went to Oppo. And finally came to Apple. If you know that the previous 20 minutes, this particular customer spent the last 20 minutes going to these previous stores that are all competitors of Apple, that gives you far better insights that, maybe this person is in fact interested in a smartphone. That's why he's going to, Huawei and Oppo and Micromax and so on and so forth. So this led us to build what we call recommender systems for these airports and shopping malls. And an online equivalent of this is on Amazon, like people who read this book also like that book, right? Or on Netflix, people who watch this movie also like that movie. It's the same idea, except that we were the first to do this in the offline world, right? So we partnered with some shopping malls and said, look, if you give us your Wi-Fi data, we can create these trajectory-based recommender systems and identify which people are really interested in your products versus those who are just either passers-by or just simply browsing and not acting upon them. So it turns out trajectory-based recommendations are far, far more effective than pure location-based targeting. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is, not everything is hunky-dory in this world, right? So not everything is picture perfect. In fact, far from it. So, working with all these companies in different contexts and different continents and different countries taught me that sometimes the data seems too good to be true, in the sense that everything seems very rosy, everything seems phenomenally positive. And it turns out that the reason it was too good to be true is because it wasn't, in the sense that this is an economy, the digital economy is susceptible and to a lot of fraud. And in fact, I should use a stronger word than susceptible because we know it happens. 1 out of 5 ads that you see on the internet or in your phones are essentially an outcome of fraud. This fraud happens in several different ways. There can be something. The most prominent of that is bot fraud. So bot fraud means that algorithms are mimicking the behavior of consumers and people. Right? So it's not me as a human being who is engaging with an ad on a genuine website. Algorithms had been trained by bad actors to mimic human behavior. And the reason is every time somebody clicks on an ad or sees an ad, somebody gets paid, right? The publisher gets paid by the brand. So in the last 2 years, I've started working with several blockchain companies, mostly in the US, some in China, mostly in the US, where we are trying to isolate fraudulent data from genuine data. And it turns out there's a lot of fraud. About 20 to 25% of internet activity is essentially fraud. This is the reason, at the very high level, we are susceptible as a society to fake news and fake content and fake ads, because it's very easy to perpetrate fraud. So my sort of goal or objective coming in the future is to use blockchain to help address the fraud data problem, whether it's fake news or fake ads or fake content, because I think it has much more than commercial implications. It has significant social welfare implications as well, right? We live in a dangerous world that is susceptible to misinformation, and it has implications beyond marketing to every part of our lives, starting from politics to other aspects of social society. So this is an area where blockchain, given the nature of its technology, it's a centralized, immutable, it's a decentralized, immutable ledger-based system. We've now had several success stories in identifying fraud using blockchain, and one such company that I'm working with is a company called Lucidity. It's based in Los Angeles, and we've had 2 recent successes with Lucidity. The first one, we partnered with Toyota, the Japanese auto manufacturer, and AT&T, the telecom provider in the US, to look at the extent of ad fraud in all of their digital marketing campaigns. Okay? It turns out that when we compared the analysis before and after blockchain, we saw something like a 21% improvement in campaign performance, simply because we're able to isolate the amount of fraud that's going on in these campaigns, right? So in other words, by spending 21% less, you're still able to get to what your objective was. Another example was 21st Century Fox. It's a well-known studio in the West again. And we saw about a 13% increase in page visits using Lucidity's blockchain. The big problem with blockchain, blockchain is not a new concept, as I'm sure many of you know, right? It's been around for 5 or 6 years, at least in its most recent form. The main problem with executing blockchain for all these years is that most organizations in the past were using a standard called Ethereum. Okay? Ethereum is also known to many of those of you who are interested in cryptocurrencies. It's sort of a competitor to Bitcoin. But turns out Ethereum was good, except that it had a massive validation problem with respect to transaction time. Okay? Ethereum is computationally very intensive, and just to give you a sense, it would take about 15 seconds for Ethereum-based blockchain to validate one transaction in this economy. Now, it turns out in 15 seconds, right, they would have accomplished several 100,000, maybe millions of transactions. So there was a big disconnect, because in the ad tech economy, given the fact that algorithms and programmatic systems have taken over the whole buying and selling of ads, it takes 200 milliseconds to buy and sell one ad on the internet. 200 milliseconds is faster than the human blink of an eye. So if you look at the speed at which transactions are occurring and the speed at which blockchain can validate transactions, there's a huge disconnect. 200 milliseconds versus 15 seconds, right? There's about a 30,000 difference in sort of validation time versus occurrence. That was the big problem with Ethereum. So what these companies are now doing is they moved away from Ethereum into something called a plasma sidechain. And to give you a simple example why that works better is, imagine you're going from, let's say, Dum Dum Airport to, I don't know, Alipur, okay? Right now, we have like several, roads and lanes, and we have traffic lights, and every few meters we are stopping and starting and stopping and starting. That's why it takes about an hour. If imagine that there was a single super highway that would connect the airport to Alipur in single shot without any traffic lights, you would go much faster. You'd get there in 20 minutes, right? So Ethereum is like it's the current scenario where you have many ways to get there, but they're all incurring traffic lights, and you're getting validated at each traffic light. You're getting essentially stopped to get validated, and that's why it takes an hour. Whereas Plasma would say, you know what, you don't need to get validated 15 times, right? A single validation at source and destination is enough. So we'll just construct a highway for you, and you get there in 20 minutes instead of an hour. So that's the sort of the best analogy I can think of, that why Ethereum-based blockchain is, despite having a well-functioning standard, is not, people are moving away because of the speed of transaction validation. Okay. So just to wrap this up, I hope you can get 3 things from this talk, if nothing else. The first is, we are increasingly entering this world where there is a distinct shift in consumer mindset between how consumers really feel about their data and what big corporations or governments can do about it. The analogy I talk about in my book is the butler versus stalker, right? So a butler is somebody who knows you very well, just like a stalker. However, the butler is a helpful person, right? He or she is not out there to get you. A stalker, obviously, I'm sure you all know what that means. So there's a very thin line dividing what is cool and delightful versus what is creepy and sort of scary, right? So the butler is the cool, delightful guy. The stalker is the creepy guy. We have examples of companies who are both, right? In my book, I talk about the ones who are acting like butlers. They're helping you get to your objective, but without being abusive or without being creepy. The second is, your mobile phone is an incredibly valuable source of data about your people, your customers. My research and my work with these companies identified 9 forces that you can monetize using the mobile data in combination with AI-based toolkits. And finally, the good news with the economy is, I think we are at a very interesting point in time where we can solve a lot of the fraud and the fake content that's going around on the internet using something like the blockchain. I wouldn't say that we have solved it. I think we are far from it, but I think the early signs are very promising, just because the data is telling us that blockchain-based systems are able to parse out genuine content or genuine data from fake content. Okay? I want to leave you with one thought, and maybe we can touch upon this when we talk with Arnab, is none of all of this that I'm talking about goes without saying that if data is the new oil, which I'm sure many of you heard of, privacy is the new climate change, right? Data and privacy go hand in hand, and it sort of goes to my first point that countries and companies have to recognize that there is an important trust relationship that needs to be built. Good news is we have examples of organizations who have done that, so we can do that as well. The bad news is it's very tempting not to do that, right? But I leave you with an optimistic note because we have seen this happen. So I'll leave you with that. In case you're interested in the book, that's one is in English, that's in many different Asian languages. It's not come out in Bengali yet, but maybe, who knows, someday. If you need to reach me, that's my email, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, and on Twitter as well. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with Arnab. Okay. Thank you.